Jake Hartley wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked at the empty desert around him. The sun was going down, and the sky was turning orange and red. He had been walking for 6 hours through the Crimson Canyon, searching for anything he could sell. Jake was a salvage mechanic. He lived on a small colony world called Kepler 7b, far from Earth and far from the busy center of human space. Most people on this world were miners or farmers. Jake was neither. He made his living by finding old machines and broken equipment, fixing them and selling them to whoever needed them. It was not a rich life, but it was honest work. Today had been a bad day. He had found nothing but sand and rocks and the bones of animals that had died long ago. His water bottle was almost empty. His legs were tired. He was ready to go home. Then he saw something strange. At the bottom of a deep part of the canyon, half buried under centuries of dirt and sand, there was metal. Not the rusty brown metal of old colony equipment. This metal was different. It was silver, but also purple, and it seemed to shine even though there was no light touching it. Jake stopped walking. He stared at the metal for a long time. Then he started to climb down. The climb was dangerous. The rocks were loose, and twice he almost fell. But Jake had been climbing in this canyon for 12 years, and he knew how to be careful. 20 minutes later, he reached the bottom. What he found made him forget how tired he was. It was a ship. A starship. But not like any starship Jake had ever seen. The vessel was huge, maybe 400 meters long. Its hull was made of that strange silver-purple metal that seemed to glow from inside. Along the top of the ship, there were symbols and letters that Jake did not recognize. They were not human letters. They were alien. But when Jake walked around to the front of the ship, he saw something that made his heart beat faster. There was a door, and above the door, there were words. English words. Welcome, they said. We have been waiting. Jake stood very still. His mind was racing. This was impossible. Humans had only come to this part of space 50 years ago. This ship looked like it had been here for hundreds of years, maybe thousands. How could there be English words on an alien ship? There was only one way to find out. The door was broken, hanging open at a bad angle. Jake squeezed through the gap and stepped inside. The interior of the ship was dark. Jake turned on his flashlight and moved the beam across the walls. Everything was covered in dust. The floor was metal, but softer than human metal, and his boots made almost no sound as he walked. He passed through several corridors, all of them empty, all of them silent. He saw doors that led to rooms he could not open. He saw machines that he could not understand. He saw more of those alien symbols on the walls, and then he reached the command deck. It was a large room, circular with a high ceiling. In the center was a chair that looked like it was made for something not quite human. Around the chair were screens and controls and buttons, all of them dark, all of them dead. Jake stepped into the room. His flashlight made long shadows on the walls, and then something happened. A light came on. Just one light, small and blue, blinking slowly near the main control panel. Jake froze. Then a voice spoke. It was a female voice, soft and gentle, coming from speakers somewhere in the ceiling. The voice spoke perfect English, but there was something strange about it. Something sad. Biological presence detected, the voice said. Initiating emergency protocols. Please state your designation. Jake's mouth was very dry. He tried to speak, but no words came out. He swallowed and tried again. Jake, he said. Jake Hartley. I am a mechanic. There was a long pause. More lights came on around the room. Pale blue lights that made everything look cold and strange. Jake could see the control panels now, and he could see that many of them were broken. Wires hung from the ceiling. Scorch marks covered the walls. When the voice spoke again, it sounded different. It sounded almost relieved. Mechanic, the voice said. I have been waiting for a mechanic for 642 years. Jake did not know what to say. He just stood there, holding his flashlight, staring at the blinking lights. The voice continued. My name is Arya. I am the artificial intelligence that controls this vessel. I was built by a species called the Volanti. They were explorers and scientists and artists. They traveled the galaxy for 1,000,000 years, and they saw many wonders. Jake found his voice. What happened to them? They died, Arya said simply. A plague came to their worlds. It killed them all in a single generation. Before they died, they sent me here. They sent me to find humanity. To find us? Why? Because they believed in you, Arya said. They had watched your species for 10,000 years. They saw you struggle. They saw you fail. But they also saw you get up and try again. They saw you do impossible things with simple tools. They believed that you were the species that would inherit the stars. Jake shook his head slowly. I am just a mechanic, he said. I fix tractors and water pumps. I do not know anything about starships. You are human, Arya replied. Your species built nuclear reactors and garages. You landed on your moon with less computing power than a simple calculator. You fix broken space telescopes with tape and wire. You are exactly what I need. Jake looked around the damaged command deck. Half the screens were cracked. Cables hung everywhere. The chair in the center was burned on one side. What happened to you? He asked. I crashed, Arya said. 642 years ago, my navigation system failed. I fell from the sky and hit this canyon. My crew died in the impact. I have been alone ever since, waiting for someone to find me. Waiting for someone who could help me fly again. Jake walked slowly around the room, looking at the damage. It was bad. Very bad. He saw systems he did not understand, technology he had never imagined. But he also saw things he recognized. Power cables, circuit boards, broken joints and cracked panels. Machines were machines, no matter who built them. I cannot promise anything, Jake said finally. This is beyond anything I have ever done. I am not asking for promises, Arya said. I am asking for help. Will you help me, Jake Hartley? Jake thought about his small house in the colony. He thought about his simple life, fixing tractors and water pumps. He thought about growing old alone on this dusty world, never seeing anything new, never doing anything important. Then he looked at the alien starship around him. He looked at the strange lights and the broken machines and the impossible technology dot, and he made a decision. Yes, he said. I will help you. If Arya had a face, Jake thought she would be smiling. Thank you, she said. Thank you, Jake. We have much work to do. Jake nodded and put down his flashlight. He pulled out his basic toolkit from his bag and looked at the nearest broken panel. Then we should start now, he said, and in the darkness of the Crimson Canyon, a human mechanic and an alien starship began their journey together. The first 3 months were the hardest of Jake's life. He moved everything he owned into the canyon. He set up a small tent beside Arya's wounded hull. He brought his tools, his food supplies, his water recycler, and his old sleeping bag. The colony thought he had gone crazy. Maybe he had. Every morning, Jake woke up with the sun. He ate a simple breakfast of protein bars and dried fruit. Then he crawled into the ship and went to work. The damage was worse than he had first thought. Much worse. Arya's power systems were almost completely destroyed. Her main reactor had shut down centuries ago, and now she was running on emergency backup power. That backup power was almost gone. If Jake did not find a way to restore her system soon, Arya would die. How long do you have? Jake asked her on the third day. At current power levels, approximately 4 months, Arya replied. Her voice was weaker now, and sometimes it flickered and cut out. Perhaps less. Jake worked faster after that. He started with the basics. He mapped every corridor of the ship, marking which systems were broken and which ones might still work. He made lists of parts he needed. He drew diagrams of circuits he did not understand, and he listened. Arya could not move. She could barely see through her few working sensors. But she could talk, and she had been alone for a very long time. She needed to talk. She told Jake about the Volanthi. They were tall beings, she said, with silver skin and eyes that could see colors humans could not imagine. They were gentle and kind. They loved music and art and poetry. They had traveled to stars for 1,000,000 years, and in all that time, they had never made war with another species. They sound nice, Jake said. He was lying on his back under a control panel, trying to reconnect the power line. They were wonderful, Arya said. They built me to be curious, to explore, to learn. They built me to love. Jake stopped working and looked up at the ceiling. To love? Yes. The Volanthi believed that intelligence without love was dangerous. They built all their machines with the ability to care. I care about my mission. I care about the people I carry. And now I care about you, Jake Hartley. Jake did not know what to say to that. He went back to work. The days turned into weeks. Jake learned things he had never thought he would learn. He learned how Volanthi power systems worked. They were not like human systems at all. Human electricity moved in straight lines, from one point to another. Volanthi power moved like water, flowing in curves and circles, filling spaces naturally. Once Jake understood this, things became easier. He built new power cables from the metal he found in the canyon. The metal was not perfect, but it was good enough. He connected these cables to Arya's secondary reactor, a smaller backup system that had survived the crash. On the 47th day, he turned it on. The reactor hummed. Lights came on throughout the ship. Arya's voice became stronger and clearer. Jake, she said, and there was something like happiness in her voice. I can see again. Her sensors were working now. She could see the canyon around her, the sky above her, the stars at night. She spent hours just looking, remembering what it felt like to be alive. I had forgotten, she whispered one evening. I had forgotten how beautiful everything is. Jake sat on her observation deck, drinking coffee he had made from his small camp stove. The stars were bright and clear, thousands of them, filling the sky like diamonds. It is pretty nice, he agreed. Jake, may I ask you something? Sure. Why are you helping me? You do not know me. You owe me nothing. Why are you spending your time and your energy on a broken ship? Jake thought about the question for a long time. He looked at the stars. He listened to the wind moving through the canyon. Because you were alone, he said finally. Because you needed help. Where I come from, that is enough. Arya was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft. The Volanthi were right about humanity, she said. You are a good species. Jake laughed. We have our problems. Trust me, all species have problems. But not all species would climb into a dark canyon to help a stranger. Not all species would give up their comfortable life to fix a broken machine. That is rare, Jake. That is special. Jake shrugged. He was not comfortable with praise. I am just a mechanic, he said. This is what I do. No, Arya said. You are more than that. You just do not know it yet. The weeks continued to pass. Jake fixed more and more systems. He repaired Arya's communication array using techniques his grandmother had taught him on the family farm back on Earth. He rebuilt her environmental controls using parts from his own equipment. He found ways to connect human technology with Volanthi technology. Building bridges between two completely different ways of thinking, it was hard work. But Jake was good at hard work, and somewhere along the way, something changed. At first, Arya was just a project, a job, something to fix. But as the months passed, she became something more. She became a friend. They talked every day. Arya told Jake stories about the Volanti, about the worlds they had visited, about the wonders they had seen. Jake told Arya stories about Earth, about humanity, about the strange and stubborn species that had somehow reached the stars. "Tell me about your home," Arya asked one night. Jake leaned back against her hull, feeling the warm metal through his jacket. "Earth, it is a blue planet, mostly water. There are mountains and forests and deserts. There are billions of people living there, all doing different things, all wanting different things. It sounds chaotic." "It is," Jake admitted. "But it is also beautiful. We fight and argue and make mistakes. But we also build amazing things. We create art and music. We explore and discover. We never stop trying to make things better. That is what the Volanti loved about you," Arya said. "Your energy, your determination, your refusal to give up." Jake smiled. "We are stubborn. That is for sure." "Stubborn is good," Arya said. "Stubborn is how you survived. Stubborn is how you reached the stars. And stubborn is how you will fix me." 3 months after Jake had found her, Arya's main systems were stable. She was still damaged. She still could not fly. But she was alive, and she was strong, and she was no longer alone. Jake stood outside her hull one evening, looking at the work they had done. The scorch marks were still there. The broken panels were still visible. But there were new parts now, human parts mixed with Volanti parts, something new and strange and wonderful. "We are making progress," he said. "Yes," Arya agreed. "But there is still much to do. Are you ready to continue?" Jake picked up his tools and walked toward the nearest access hatch. "Always," he said, and together, the human mechanic and the alien starship kept working, kept talking, kept building something neither of them could have built alone. 1 year had passed since Jake first found the ship in the canyon. In that time, everything had changed. Arya was no longer a wreck. She was a living machine, humming with power, glowing with soft light. Her sensors watched the sky day and night. Her voice was strong and clear. She was still damaged, still incomplete, but she was alive. And today, she would fly. Jake stood on the observation deck, looking out through the newly repaired window. The sun was rising over the canyon walls, painting everything in shades of gold and orange. It was going to be a beautiful day. "Are you ready?" he asked. "I have been ready for 643 years, Arya replied. There was excitement in her voice and something else. Fear, maybe. Or hope. Jake nodded. He walked to the control chair in the center of the command deck and sat down. It was not made for humans, but he had added some cushions to make it comfortable. Over the past year, he had learned how to operate most of Arya's basic systems. He was not an expert, but he knew enough. "Let us do this," he said. The startup sequence took 10 minutes. Lights flickered across the control panels. Numbers and symbols appeared on screens. Deep inside the ship, Jake could hear the sound of machines coming to life, engines warming up, systems connecting. Then the thrusters fired. It was just a small burst at first, just enough to shake the dust from Arya's hull. But Jake could feel it. After all these months of working and hoping and dreaming, he could feel the ship waking up. "Thrusters at 20%, Arya reported. "Power level stable. Beginning vertical lift." The ship shook. Metal groaned. Jake gripped the arms of his chair and held on. And then they were rising. It was slow at first. Just a few centimeters, then a meter, then 2. Dirt and rocks fell away from Arya's hull as she pulled herself free from the ground that had held her for so long. Jake watched through the window as the canyon floor dropped away beneath them. 10 meters, Arya said. 15, 20. Jake laughed. He could not help it. He was flying. They were flying. 30 meters. Holding position. The ship stopped rising and hung in the air, perfectly still, perfectly balanced. Jake looked out at the canyon spread below him. He could see his camp, tiny and far away. He could see the trails he had walked 1,000 times. He could see the world from a perspective he had never imagined. "Arya," he said, "you are flying." "We are flying," she corrected him. "I could not have done this without you, Jake." They stayed in the air for 15 minutes, just hovering, just feeling what it was like to be free. Then, slowly and carefully, Arya lowered herself back to the ground. The landing was smooth, almost perfect. When the engine shut down, Jake sat in silence for a long moment. His hands were shaking. His heart was beating fast. He had spent a year working toward this moment, and now it was real. "That was amazing," he finally said. "It was," Arya agreed. "But it was only the beginning. I cannot go far on thrusters alone. I need my main engines repaired. I need my navigation systems restored. And most importantly, I need my faster-than-light drive fixed." Jake nodded. He knew this. The thrusters could lift Arya into the air, but they could not take her to the stars. For that, she needed her advanced systems, the technology that allowed the Volanti to cross galaxies in days instead of centuries. "Where do we start?" he asked. "The main engines," Arya said. "They are in the lower section of the ship. Most of them were destroyed in the crash, but some parts survived. If we can rebuild them, I will be able to fly properly again." Jake stood up from the chair. His legs were still a little shaky, but he felt good. He felt better than he had felt in years. "Then let us get to work," he said. The next 4 months were intense. Jake spent every waking hour in the engine room, a massive space deep in Arya's hull where the main propulsion systems were housed. The damage here was severe. Entire sections of machinery had melted in the crash. Cables hung like dead vines. Control panels were cracked and dark, but Jake had learned a lot in the past year. He understood Volanti technology now, at least the basics. He knew how their power systems worked, how their circuits connected, how their machines thought. And he was not alone anymore. Word had spread about the strange ship in the canyon. Other people from the colony had come to see what Jake was doing. Most of them just looked and left, shaking their heads at his crazy project. But a few stayed. Katie Monroe was the first. She was a propulsion specialist from the colony's small spaceport, a young woman with short dark hair and quick hands. She had heard about Arya and wanted to see for herself. When she saw the engine room, her eyes went wide. "This is incredible," she said. "I have never seen anything like this." "Neither had I," Jake admitted. "But I am learning." Katie started coming every day after that. She brought her own tools, her own knowledge, her own ideas. Together, she and Jake worked on the engines, combining human and Volanti technology in ways neither species had ever imagined. Then came Danny Vega, a young programmer from the colony's communication center. He was only 23 years old, but he was brilliant. When he saw Arya's computer systems, he immediately understood how they worked. "It is like music," he explained to Jake. "The code flows like a song. Once you hear the rhythm, it all makes sense." Danny rebuilt Arya's navigation systems in 3 weeks. He wrote new programs that let her sensors see farther and clearer than ever before. He created interfaces that let human technology talk to Volanti technology. Finally, there was old Ben Carver, a retired shipwright who had built spacecraft for 40 years before moving to Kepler 7b. He was 70 years old, with white hair and wrinkled hands. But his mind was still sharp. "I thought I was done building things," he told Jake. but this is too interesting to ignore. Ben knew things about engineering that Jake had never learned. He showed them how to strengthen Arya's hull, how to balance her weight distribution, how to make her faster and more efficient. With his help, the repairs went twice as fast. By the end of the 4th month, the engines were ready. They gathered on the command deck for the second test flight. Jake was in the control chair. Katie was monitoring the engines. Danny was watching the navigation systems. Ben was checking the structural readings. All systems are green, Arya reported. Ready for full engine test. Jake took a deep breath. Let us do it. The engines fired. Not the small thrusters this time, but the main engines, the ones that could push Arya through space at incredible speeds. The sound was like thunder, deep and powerful. The ship shook, then lifted, then shot upward like a bullet. Jake was pushed back into his chair by the force. He watched through the window as the canyon disappeared below them. Then the clouds were gone. Then the sky turned from blue to black. They were in space. We did it, Katie whispered. We actually did it. Below them, Kepler 7b hung like a brown and green marble. Above them, the stars stretched out forever. Jake looked around at his friends. At Katie and Danny and Ben. At the screens and controls and lights, and he laughed. Arya, he said. How do you feel? I feel alive, she replied. Truly alive. Thank you, all of you. This is a gift I can never repay. You do not have to repay it, Jake said. That is not why we did it. Then why did you do it? Jake thought about the question. He looked at the stars outside the window. He thought about everything they had accomplished, everything they had built. Because it was worth doing, he said simply. Because some things are more important than money or comfort. Because helping someone who needs help is always the right thing to do. Arya was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was warm. The Volanthi would have loved you, she said. All of you. Maybe we will meet them someday, Danny said. In whatever comes next. Maybe you will, Arya agreed. But first, there is one more thing we need to do. One more system to repair. The faster-than-light drive, Jake said. Yes, and when that is done, I can show you something wonderful. Something the Volanthi left behind for humanity to find. Jake looked at his friends. They all nodded. Then let us get started, he said, and floating in orbit above a dusty colony world. A team of humans and one alien starship prepared for the next chapter of their journey together. It took another 2 years to repair the faster-than-light drive. This was the most difficult challenge Jake and his team had ever faced. The drive was not like any human technology. It did not work by pushing or pulling. It worked by bending space itself, folding the universe like a piece of paper so that two distant points touched. The Volanthi had called it the fold drive, and most of it had been destroyed in the crash. Jake spent months studying Arya's technical archives, learning the principles behind the drive. Katie worked on the power systems, building new converters that could handle the incredible energy the drive required. Danny wrote programs to control the complex calculations needed for each jump. And Ben designed the physical housing, the chamber that would hold the drive core. They failed many times. The first test nearly burned out Arya's entire power system. The second test created a field that warped the hull in strange ways. The third test did nothing at all. But humans were stubborn, and they did not give up. On the 427th day of work, they were finally ready for a real test. Everyone gathered on the command deck. Jake was in the control chair, his hands resting on the armrests. Katie stood by the engine controls. Danny watched the navigation screens. Ben monitored the structural systems. They had all grown older in the years since they first met. They had all changed, but they were still here, still working, still believing. Full drive status? Jake asked. All systems are stable, Arya replied. Power levels are optimal. Navigation coordinates are locked. We are ready. Jake looked at his friends. Katie gave him a small nod. Danny smiled nervously. Ben crossed his arms and waited. Okay, Jake said. Let us make history. He pressed the activation button. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the universe twisted. Jake could not describe what he felt. It was like falling and flying at the same time. It was like being turned inside out and put back together. The stars outside the window blurred into lines of light, then disappeared completely. Everything was white, then black, then white again. Then it was over. Jake blinked. His head hurt. His stomach felt strange. But he was alive, and the ship was stable, and the screens showed something impossible. They were somewhere else. Navigation confirms, Danny said, his voice shaking with excitement. We have traveled 47 light years in less than 3 seconds. We are in the Volanthi system. Jake stood up and walked to the window. Below them was a planet, green and blue and beautiful. Clouds swirled over continents. Oceans sparkled in the light of an orange sun. It looked almost like Earth, but different, older, quieter. This is Volanthi Prime, Arya said softly. The homeworld of my creators. I have not seen it for over 600 years. Jake stared at the planet. Somewhere down there, 1,000,000 years of civilization had risen and fallen. Somewhere down there, a species had lived and loved and dreamed before disappearing forever. What happened to them? Katie asked. You said there was a plague? Yes, Arya said. It came from nowhere. It spread faster than anyone could stop it. Within a single generation, the Volanthi were gone. All of them. Billions of lives ended in silence. That is horrible, Danny whispered. It was. But before they died, they did something remarkable. They gathered all their knowledge, all their art, all their history, and they saved it. They built archives in orbit around this planet, protected by shields that would last for millions of years. They wanted whoever came after them to find it. They wanted their legacy to survive. Jake turned from the window. And they wanted humanity to find it. Yes, they chose your species out of all the species they had observed. They believed you would be worthy of their gift. Ben stepped forward. Where are these archives? Can we reach them? Yes, I am detecting a station in high orbit. It is still powered, still protected. Follow me, and I will take you there. Arya adjusted her course and flew toward the station. It was massive, larger than any human structure Jake had ever seen. The station was shaped like a flower, with dozens of petals spreading out from a central core. Each petal was a storage facility, containing knowledge beyond imagination. They docked at the main entrance and walked inside. Jake had expected darkness and silence. Instead, he found light. The interior of the station glowed with soft blue light that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The walls were covered with images, moving pictures of the Volanthi going about their lives. Jake saw them playing music, creating art, teaching their children. He saw them exploring strange worlds and meeting other species. He saw them laughing and crying and loving. They look so human, Katie said. Well, not human exactly, but their expressions, their emotions. They feel familiar. The Volanthi believed that all intelligent life shares certain things, Arya explained. Love, fear, hope, joy. The forms are different, but the feelings are the same. They walked deeper into the station. Danny connected his computer to the archive systems and began exploring the data. His eyes grew wider with every passing minute. This is everything, he said. Science, mathematics, medicine, engineering. They have solutions to problems we have not even discovered yet. They have answers to questions we have not thought to ask. And it is all for us? Ben asked. Yes, but there is more. There is a message. Arya led them to the heart of the station, a circular chamber at the very center. In the middle of the chamber was a pedestal, and on the pedestal was a small crystal. The crystal glowed with inner light, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. Touch it, Arya said. The message is for humans. It responds to human contact. Jake stepped forward. He reached out his hand and touched the crystal. Light exploded from the pedestal. The chamber disappeared, replaced by stars. Jake felt like he was floating in space, surrounded by galaxies and nebulae and wonders beyond counting. And then he heard the voice. It was an old voice, kind and tired, speaking in careful English. If you are hearing this, then you have found us. You have proven yourselves worthy. A figure appeared before Jake. It was a Volante, tall and silver-skinned, with eyes that held infinite kindness. We watched your species for 10,000 years. We saw your wars and your cruelty. We saw the darkness in your hearts. But we also saw the light. We saw your courage and your creativity. We saw your stubborn refusal to surrender, no matter the odds. We saw you help strangers. We saw you sacrifice for each other. We saw you reach for the stars. The figure spread its arms wide, and the universe seemed to spin around Jake. We are gone now, but our knowledge remains. Take it, use it, build something beautiful. Make mistakes and learn from them. Fight and make peace. Cry and laugh. Live fully, as we once lived. The voice grew softer. And remember this, you are not alone. The universe is vast, and there are others out there waiting to be found. Be kind to them. Show them the same courage you have shown us. And never, ever stop reaching. The light faded. Jake found himself back in the chamber, tears running down his face. Katie was crying too. Danny was staring at nothing, his mouth open. Ben had his hand over his heart. They believed in us, Jake whispered. They actually believed in us. Yes, Arya said. And they were right to believe. You came all this way. You fixed a broken ship. You found their archives. You have already proven them right. Jake wiped his eyes and looked at his friends. They looked back at him, and he saw the same thing in all their faces. Wonder, gratitude, determination. We need to share this, he said, with everyone. The whole human race needs to know what is here. Then let us go home, Arya said. Let us tell them. Jake nodded. He took one last look around the chamber, at the glowing crystal, at the images of the Volante still moving on the walls. Thank you, he said quietly to the empty room. We will not let you down. Then he turned and walked back toward the ship, ready to bring the greatest gift in human history back to his people. They returned to Kepler 7b as heroes. Word of their discovery spread across human space like fire. Within days, news channels on every colony world were talking about the Volante archives. Within weeks, scientists and scholars were requesting access to the data. Within months, the first ships were being built to carry researchers to Volante Prime. Jake watched it all happen from a distance. He did not want fame or attention. He had never wanted those things. He was just a mechanic who had found a ship in a canyon and decided to help. But the universe had other plans for him. The Unified Human Council, the government that oversaw all human colonies, invited Jake and his team to Earth. They wanted to honor the people who had made first contact with an alien civilization, even if that civilization was long dead. They wanted to thank them. Jake did not want to go. He was comfortable on Kepler 7b, comfortable with his simple life. But Arya convinced him. You should see your homeworld, she said. You have told me so many stories about it. Now you can show me. So Jake went to Earth. He brought Katie and Danny and Ben with him. And of course, he brought Arya. The flight took 3 weeks in a normal human ship. It would have taken 3 seconds in Aria, but the council wanted her to stay hidden for now. There were too many questions, too many concerns about alien technology falling into the wrong hands. Jake understood, even if he did not like it. When they finally reached Earth, Jake pressed his face against the window like a child thought it was beautiful. More beautiful than any picture, any video, any story. The blue ocean stretched from horizon to horizon. The continents were patches of green and brown and white. Clouds swirled in patterns that seemed almost artistic. "That is your home," Arya said through the small communicator Jake wore in his ear. She was in orbit, invisible to most sensors, watching through her own eyes. "That is everyone's home," Jake replied. "The place where it all started." They landed in New Geneva, the capital city of the Unified Council. Jake stepped off the ship and into chaos. Thousands of people had gathered to see them. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Security officers tried to maintain order. Jake felt lost. He was not made for crowds and attention. He was made for quiet canyons and broken machines and the company of friends. But then he saw the children dot. There were hundreds of them, standing at the front of the crowd, held back by ropes and guards. They were holding signs and pictures. Some of the signs said, "Thank you." Some said, "We believe in you." Some had drawings of stars and ships and distant worlds. One little girl was holding a sign that said, "I want to be like you." Jake stopped walking. He looked at the girl and her bright eyes and hopeful face, and something shifted inside him. This was why it mattered. Not the fame or the honors or the attention, but this. The children who would grow up knowing that humans had reached the stars. The dreamers who would be inspired to do impossible things. The future that was being born right now in the eyes of people who believed. Jake smiled at the girl. She smiled back. Then he walked forward to meet his future. The ceremony was long and formal. Jake stood on a stage with his friends while important people gave important speeches. They talked about the Volanti and their gift. They talked about the new technologies already being developed from the archives. They talked about the future of humanity among the stars. Jake barely heard any of it. He was thinking about the canyon, about the first day he had found Arya, about all the work and hope and struggle that had brought him to this moment. When it was finally his turn to speak, he kept it simple. "I am just a mechanic," he said. "I fix things. That is all I have ever done. I found a broken ship in a canyon, and I decided to fix it. I did not know it would lead to all this. I did not know it would change anything. I just saw something that needed help, and I helped." He paused and looked out at the crowd. That is what humans do. We help each other. We fix things. We refuse to give up, even when the odds are impossible. The Volanti saw that in us 10,000 years ago. They believed we were worth saving. They believed we could inherit the stars. Jake took a deep breath. I think they were right. Not because we are perfect. We are not. We make mistakes. We hurt each other. We fail. But we also get up. We try again. We learn. We grow. We reach for things that seem impossible, and sometimes we actually reach them. He looked up at the sky, where he knew Arya was watching. "Thank you for believing in us," he said. "We will try to be worthy of that belief." The crowd was silent for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Then more people joined. Then everyone was applauding. A sound like thunder that rolled across the plaza and echoed off the buildings. Jake stepped back from the microphone, embarrassed and proud and overwhelmed all at once. Katie put her hand on his shoulder. "That was perfect," she said. Danny grinned. "You made half of them cry." Ben just nodded, his old eyes shining with something that might have been tears. After the ceremony, life slowly returned to normal. Or at least, a new kind of normal. Jake did not stay on Earth. He went back to the stars, back to Arya, back to the life he had built. But things were different now. Arya was no longer a secret. She flew openly between colony worlds, carrying passengers and cargo and hope. She became a symbol of what humans in Volanti had built together. And Jake was always with her. He still fixed things. He still maintained her systems, still climbed through her corridors with his toolkit, still talked to her every day. But now there was more. Now there were young engineers who wanted to learn from him. Now there were children who asked for his autograph. Now there were people who looked up at the stars and thought of him. Jake did not understand any of it. He was still just a mechanic. He still felt uncomfortable with praise. But he accepted it because he knew it was not really about him. It was about what they had done together. One evening, 5 years after they had first met, Jake sat on Arya's observation deck and watched the stars drift by. They were far from any colony now, floating in the quiet dark between solar systems. "Arya," he said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you ever regret it?" "Being found, I mean. Your life was simple before. You were just waiting. Now everything is complicated." Arya was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was warm. "I waited alone in the dark for 642 years, she said. "I watched my creators die. I felt my systems fail one by one. I thought I would sleep forever, forgotten, lost. And then you came. You gave me life. You gave me purpose. You gave me friends. Complicated is wonderful, Jake. Complicated means being alive." Jake smiled. "I suppose you are right. I usually am." He laughed. Outside the window, the stars continued their slow dance. "What now?" Jake asked. "What comes next?" "Whatever we want," Arya said. "There are billions of stars out there. Billions of worlds. Billions of stories waiting to be discovered. We could explore forever and never see it all." "That sounds nice." "It does." A pause. "Jake, yes. Thank you. For everything. For finding me. For believing in me. For being my friend." Jake put his hand on the wall, feeling the familiar warmth of Arya's hull. "Thank you for letting me help," he said. "It has been the adventure of a lifetime." "The adventure is not over yet." "No," Jake agreed. "It is just beginning." And together, the human mechanic and the alien starship flew on into the endless night. Behind them was a legacy of 2 civilizations. Ahead of them was a universe of possibilities. And between them was something rare and precious. Something that had started with a broken ship and a stubborn man and had grown into something much, much more. They did not know what they would find out there among the stars. They did not know what challenges waited for them. But they knew one thing for certain. They would face it together. And that was enough.